Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Sigi, one of the WFA's educators and a women's mindset and body image coach. Today, I am joined by the lovely Dr. Nat Kringoudis, who is a leading women's health practitioner, best-selling author, to chat all women's health and libido, which was going to be a fun conversation for us to have today. However, you may remember that Nat and I sat down a couple of years ago where we dove deeper into how to work with your cycle for your advantage, debunking PMS facts and tips, and how to manage your stress. So if you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you flick back. If I'm not mistaken, it's season 1, episode 30. And yeah, but today we're changing the topic a little bit more, which will be a little bit more spicy. So Nat, I want to thank you again for jumping and joining me today. And I want us to chat all things libido. And I know this is something that you're very passionate about, educating a lot of women. And I would love to start by asking you, what are some common factors that can contribute to someone who has low libido?
Well, first of all, Sigi, thank you for having me back. That always feels nice to be welcomed back into somebody's world because you feel like you ticked a box the first time around. So thanks. But I mean, I think it's an interesting topic, and I think we could probably talk about this for hours. And I know we don't necessarily have hours, so let's just cut to the chase. I think, we obviously associate libido with our sex drive. I think libido, however, is a little bit more than that. I think libido is a feeling. It's a state of being. It's not just being able to, in the moment have a nice time when being intimate with somebody. But I do think a lot of women really struggle with it. They don't necessarily understand it, or they shy away from it. We did some recent polls because of our upcoming masterclass around libido, and it was like, oh, I should bring them up, but a large portion of women were embarrassed to talk about it. And I think that's a generational thing. So that's the first thing we have to get past, right? It probably wasn't talked about with us in our family home. I know it wasn't in mine. And I get that. I think that there's this fine line because there's this age appropriate part of the conversation that I think we need to respect and have boundaries around. But at the same time, I'm trying to promote a libido class with a 15-year-old teenager watching my Instagram right now. So I think that keeps me in check because I would actually probably be a far lot looser if she wasn't watching. But at the same time, I think it's really important for her to have questions around, well, what is that? And I'm more curious about it and not being a taboo subject. So I think there's a large portion of us that actually just are too afraid to talk about it. And then I think there's also this portion of us that assume that because we're getting older, it just disappears. And we're here to talk about that today because that's not true. And then I think also there's another layer to what are our hormones doing. And I think we're very good at blaming our hormones, but maybe our hormones actually aren't the issue. So there's a lot of moving parts, I think, when it comes to libido, from confidence through to body image to hormones to, there's a lot of this, no different to any other part of our health. It's just that this part of our health isn't seen as essential. Therefore, we just don't put as much focus on it.
I want to touch on the first point that you mentioned regarding that most women feel embarrassed about the fact about talking about libido or talking openly about sex. And I can so resonate with that because when I was young, I didn't have that conversation with my parents nor my mom. I kind of did the research myself and went about exploring it independently. So it's really nice to have this refreshing outlook that you have a 15-year-old daughter who's trying to figure out what the hell all of this is, but still staying in your realm of, being the parent, being the authority to make them understand that, hey, we can still talk about this, but there's certain boundaries around that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think children ask questions when they're ready to learn about something. And we were probably told various lies as kids when we asked those questions, or our parents weren't equipped to answer it. They were embarrassed themselves. There's lots of reasons why we might not have felt like we had enough education around it. And I do always say that I think our parents were doing the best job that they knew how to do. And it's not a disservice to them at all, but it's certainly how we've landed in, the current way that a lot of women feel around their libido. So I think not just libido, I think this is about all aspects of health, sexual health, reproductive health. Answering age-appropriate questions to our children is super important. It starts from, Mummy, where did I come from? And actually having an honest conversation, Daddy has sperm, Mum has an egg. They have to come together, and that's conception. That for a 3-year-old is enough. You're not getting into the weeds of what actually happens. But when a time is right, a child will say, well, hang on a minute, how does the egg and the sperm meet? And then you will explain that, So it doesn't mean it's this bombshell that's dropped on a young woman or young man or young person. It means that it's this evolved conversation over time. So it's not scary, it's not taboo, it's not evil. It's just something that we as humans experience. And so I think that, children are our greatest teachers. And that's why I think also me at the moment sharing this in a way that is also appropriate for my 15-year-old to see, I think it keeps me in check, that's for sure. Because like I said, I would create a whole bunch of hilarious reels right now. I actually did create one, and then I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. And so just coming up with creative ways. But what that does also is it speaks to other people that might feel that they can't talk about it, or that we're shining a light on it in various ways. We all learn in different ways. We actually know that we learn the most when we're having fun. So, how can we make this fun at the same time? I found those statistics I want to tell you really quickly, as I asked women how their libido was. And so this is probably a survey of several thousand women on Instagram, just on stories. And 14% said it's great. 45% said it's up and down. And 41% said that ship has sailed moons ago. And I'm like, it's not gone, babe. We've just got to actually work out how to reignite that part of you. And I asked if a lot of people just accepted that is their life now. Like wherever it's at, that's where you're at for the rest of your life. And 41% also said, that they agreed with that phase of their life that they're at, that's where they're at. And the final one I want to just share a light on is, when you hear the word libido, what is your initial response? 11% of people said that they snicker. They're like, libido. Like 36% said they sigh, which to me was like, oh gosh, those were the days type of thing. 21% said they were embarrassed, and 32% said they didn't care less. So it's very interesting, the responses and the different results and the different way that we look at it. But I think you can see underlying women, there's a fundamental issue here that we don't talk about. And that's the other thing that I've noticed in sharing a lot of this on Instagram, is that generally my posts would get a lot of attention. Women are scared to like the libido post because they don't want to be labeled as something. It's no different to fertility. We find that with fertility as well. Women don't want to like the infertility post because they don't want people to think that they're having trouble having children. So what's the message underlying here is we just need to talk more about these things to make them something that is not scary, not taboo, not something that you're going to be judged or shut down about, that we're all in it together.
Yeah. Oh my God. You're literally speaking my language right now, because lately I've been delving more towards libido around body image with women. And again, like body image can be quite a taboo topic for women as well. And I love the fact that you mentioned that putting out fun content brings more attention, but it's more relatable. People like seeing that instead of being like so serious. And a few weeks ago, I put a meme up, and it was like me pretending to do work, but realistically I'm thinking about dick and balls, or something about wanting to come or having an orgasm. And in relatable to the likes were very low. However, there were many shares, there were many saves, and I'm like, okay, the information is needed, but women are still feeling a little bit uncomfortable by liking or expressing this way of thinking. And again, it could be generational, it could be the embarrassment. But the thing is, and I can totally resonate to the embarrassment side of things, because so many years I was someone who, I wouldn't say I was like sexually active, but there was a lot of sexual energy and I just did not know what to do with it. And I feel as if a lot of women have this same feeling, but then when it comes to actually expressing it, they sort of like are feeling held back, or they, block themselves from it because they think it's wrong to experience it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And again, it comes back to what we were saying before, that no one is talking about it, no one is sharing about it. And if they are, they feel embarrassed. So I totally agree. And I think first and foremost, we need to identify, where do we sit in all of this ourselves? Like, where am I right now? When I hear that word, which one of those things did you do? Did you snicker? Did you sigh? And there's nothing wrong with snickering, by the way. I actually think it's kind of funny. But at the same time, it's like often we deflect by making fun of something. So we're possibly actually deep down probably sighing underneath. But I do think that the challenge also is, let's look at, well, why is this happening outside of the fact that we're not talking about it? There are so many facets as to why it can, your libido might not be front and center. And that can be normal too, depending on your, what phase or stage you're at. Even in your cycle, you're going to find that you should find that at the peak time of the cycle, ovulation, that's when your own desire and drive is higher than definitely just before the period. But a lot of women will say that on their period that they actually really do feel like they want to be intimate and have sex. So it's like, we're all different. But what I do want to say is there is definitely, it's a normal body response to put libido on the back burner when life is very busy, when you are not in a regular routine or regime of actually spending intimate time together. And it gets hard because there's children, there's work, there's life, and there is a period of time for especially if you have children, there's definitely a period of time where you have to work really hard at your health in general. And this is just an extension of your health. So, it can be circumstantial. When we are under a lot of stress and cortisol is high, our sex hormones are put on the back burner. They're not essential right then and there. The problem isn't that at all. That's a coping mechanism. That's a normal body coping mechanism. That's exactly what your body should be doing under an influence of high stress. The issue is that we stay in a high stress state for sometimes months, sometimes forever. And so it's not any wonder that our sex hormones are suffering and we don't feel great. Now, that doesn't just come with a symptom of low libido or desire. That comes with a whole truckload of other symptoms, because it starts to really impact your sex hormones, which means it might look like, heavy periods, ovulation pain, PMS, mood swings. Like, you're not feeling great anyway. So the last thing you're thinking about is anything outside of survival at that point. So I think piecing all that together, it's actually more, I spend far more time helping women to understand their body's doing exactly what it's supposed to do in the circumstances, and how do we change the circumstances to change the outcome, rather than just focusing on, in this example, let's say libido.
It's so relatable, and people obviously don't realize or not educated enough yet around how the hormones can impact our sexual desire. And I know you've covered bits of it now, but for someone who actually doesn't understand how their cycle is predominantly contributing to their sexual desire, like, how could they find this balance naturally? And as you mentioned, like, some women will feel that peak of sexual desire during the ovulation, but we've also found out that some of them want it during their periods.
Yeah, I mean, I think understanding the ebbs and flows of your cycle is super important. It gives you grace to be what you are in that moment. And if you don't know that, it can feel extremely difficult just on the day-to-day. So typically in a textbook case, you you have your period. Now, whether or not some people feel an increased desire at that time, I think that everyone's different there. Typically, I would say the majority of women don't. They actually want to recluse. They want to sleep more. They want to eat more. They don't want anyone. I don't want anyone touching me. That's for sure. I'm like, just leave me alone. It's only for a couple of days, but you sure as hell ain't coming near me. And that's not just my husband. That's my children as well. Or anyone else in the near vicinity. I'll tell you a funny story in a minute. So, that's very normal. But as you come out of the bleeding phase and into your follicular phase and then ovulation phase, what your hormones are doing at this point in time, and as your estrogen starts to build and then eventually your hormones trigger ovulation and your testosterone peaks, this is when we should see this, this desire to actually want to be more social, want to go out and meet people. If you're single, you notice that you feel good about that. You have this energy about yourself. Equally, you still can be social when you have a partner, don't get me wrong, or you're married or you have children or whatever the scenario. But you want to be that way based on what your hormones are doing. And that's your body is basically setting you up, regardless of whether you like this or not. It is, as a woman, you are a pregnancy machine. That's what it is doing every month. It's setting you up for pregnancy. And then if you don't conceive, it just repeats the process, which is why you get this peak phase in your cycle where it's basically just throwing it all out. You're trying to get you to go out and meet someone so you can have sex to reproduce. So it's why you want it more at that point in time. And then the downside, it's not the downside, but the other side of that, coming out of ovulation into our luteal phase and then deep into our luteal phase pre-period is when we come back down the other side. So you can feel that. And there is definitely, for me personally, in the lead up to my period, there is 2 days, and I know this about myself, that I just need to do the bare minimum. I don't necessarily feel terrible. I'm just low. My creativity's low. Personally, to me, that doesn't feel very nice when my creativity's low. I'm a creative person. But knowing that, I can give myself the grace to just be whatever that needs to be for those few days. And if I do that and I really honor that, then once those few days is over, I'm back. I'm like, yep, I'm back and let's go. If I don't do that, that kind of bounce back doesn't feel as great. It's not as obvious to me if I don't honor that and if I try and push through that. So it really is very important to be monitoring this to actually know. I'll tell you something funny. My business partner and I for Embody, which is the product I was talking before we started our new little baby, our new venture, we scheduled a strategy trip, which we basically just lock ourselves in a room for 2 days, usually in a beautiful location, and just get work done on our business. Anyway, so we booked this beautiful accommodation, and we booked it like 4 months out or 5 months out and just put in the calendar and like, okay, that's the next strategy session, tick, done, whatever. So anyway, this is last week. So last week we arrive and she did text me and she's like, I don't think we timed this the best. I think we're due for our period. And I was like, oh, no, I think I'll still be at least 7 days out come Monday. Anyway, so we get there. We had to drive pretty far. We didn't realize how far away it was. We get there the first day, good. We get some stuff done. Day 2, we looked at each other at one point. I'm like, what has happened? I said, I feel like every part of me has just been drained from my head to my toes. I can't think. I don't want to do this. I'm sorry. I'm good for nothing. Every creative part of me is gone. And then I pulled up my calendar and my period was due the next day. And so we looked at it and her period was due the next day. And we were like, okay, that was a fail. We need to consult the calendar next time because you can't have 2 people good for nothing. You can have one and not drag. One can be creative and one can just sit there and take notes. That's fine. You can't have both of you doing that at the same time. So it's just very interesting. But knowing it, we both just actually decided that's fine. Let's turn everything off. Let's go and sit down and have a glass of wine and chill out and let's watch a movie and sleep a lot. And that's what we did. And it was kind of a waste of a trip, but at the same time, it was the best. So, we have to honor these things, and it really does make a huge difference, because now this week I feel very, very able to get things done and get back on track.
I can so relate to the calendar side of things, and it's so refreshing to hear that not only I make those mistakes around my cycle. Yeah. And you know what? At times, with certain projects that we have, it's not a matter of like pushing it to another month because we have deadlines, we have to get them. So again, as you mentioned, you do your best as you can. In regards to the lifestyle changes, because I know most of the women that do engage in the podcast are either coaches or women who are into their health and fitness. What are some lifestyle changes that might help them improve their libido, aside from the calendar ticking that we mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to identify, is there a lot of stress, and is that actually pulling the handbrake on our libido? We need to identify whether we're in a really bad habit and we just aren't in it. And also, the other thing I'll say to patients all the time, is it that you can't have sex and be intimate and it really hurts and it's just not enjoyable? Or is it that once you're actually in the moment, it's actually enjoyable, there's no issue. It's just that you're not thinking about it, right? They're not the same thing. And the reason you're not thinking about it is generally because you're too busy to think about it. You haven't actually carved that time out. If I made you schedule in your calendar 2 minutes every morning to actually think about it, I bet you'd actually be thinking about it all day, because you've already set yourself up to start thinking about it. So it's because other things have taken priority. It's also pretty normal when you're juggling a lot of things for your partner to tap you on the shoulder and you to roll your eyes and go, oh, no, but actually, okay, fine. And then when you're in the moment, this is actually good. Like, that's pretty normal. And I think a lot of women think because they're not the ones instigating it, that therefore they don't have a libido. And that's not what we're talking about. So I think identifying all of these things. And then the other thing too, I really do think when we aren't taking care of ourselves, when we're not sleeping enough, this is not rocket science, by the way, but when we're especially not exercising enough, I think that's a big part of it as well. It's not even just body image. It's about feeling comfortable. When you feel comfortable in your body, you feel more attractive. And so therefore you might actually look at yourself and be like, okay, this is good, But I mean, it's very interesting. I've had some time off from not completely off from exercise, but I broke my foot back in May, and it's taken me a little while to get sort of things back in track. And I was still lifting weights and doing a little bit, but actually committed in the last week or two to back at the gym. Holy moly, what a difference that makes to you, just whole everything. Like, even look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I even just look happier. So what are the things that we've discounted or we've removed that we once did? And it also is about having conversations with our partners. If I tell my husband, hey, just because I'm not tapping you on the shoulder doesn't mean don't tap me on the shoulder. Even if I tell you I don't want you to do that, actually probably just need you to do that, and just having these open and honest conversations as well. But gosh, there's a lot of moving parts, isn't there?
I feel as if the stress one is probably one of the biggest reasons why women aren't able to tap into the sexual desire and libido.
100%. And like I said, by the nature of what cortisol does, it pulls rank, and it's not even taking your mind there. And in terms of, actually, it does a couple of things. So it pulls the handbrake on progesterone, and progesterone's a calming hormone. We have that from ovulation to when our period is due. When there's not enough of it and it tapers off too early, or we're just not making enough of it, this is where we see, some women will have PMS from ovulation, which is probably more PMDD, but PMS from ovulation right through to when their period arrives. They do not want to be intimate. That is like, it's just not what you want. Correct. It's awful. It is. You're dry, like it hurts, like that's not And that's also can be a low testosterone factor, which is why, again, movement can be so important. So it's not about, okay, progesterone's the end of the line here. This is the fundamentally we go, we just supplement that. No, we don't. We actually have to fix the cortisol to fix the progesterone. But cortisol also drives estrogen crazy. So then if we're seeing that happen and estrogen's high, it still affects progesterone. Progesterone still comes in low, but we end up with ovulation pain. So at a time where you're supposed to be feeling the peak in your cycle, you're in pain. The last thing you want someone to do is touch you. Then you also probably more than likely experience heavy bleeding that could last for 10 days. So again, you're not thinking about it or probably wanting it or feeling attractive at that point in time. So it really, if you said to me, Nat, what's one thing that would really move the needle for people? It's actually managing their cortisol. How can we better manage cortisol? Because I guarantee the majority of people, when they're on vacation, they have no problem when it comes to their libido. Actually, when it comes to many of those things, people will come back and say, I didn't have any ovulation pain. I didn't have any period pain. I didn't even know it was coming. And then it surprised me because, let's face it always shows up on holiday. So cortisol is really a big part of this issue. The other thing I do want to also touch on is as we get older, I think we've definitely accepted that our libido declines because testosterone, the role of testosterone. When our hormones are balanced, we actually should have more testosterone than ever after menopause. And so that should mean that you should feel pretty great and not feel like there's vaginal dryness or, but a lot of women don't have this and a lot of women can have low testosterone. So, that's something else I think that's really important to look at. And if you know that you are somebody who is experiencing or predisposed to anxiety and depression, that can be another factor to think about. And there's a lot of research, and you probably know this better than me, around movement and then, dopamine and endorphins. And you actually have to commit to doing more of these things to help to support the regulation of your hormones. So there's always a recipe that you have to figure out, what's my libido recipe? That's what I would be asking. Out of all of these things, we're throwing all of these different variations at you, but what's your recipe for improved libido? Which boxes of these things are you ticking? Is it that you are predisposed to, challenges with your moods? All right, well, I need to move more and increase more of those, good feeling hormones to help me, which is also then going to have a flow-on effect. It's going to help my melatonin. It's going to help my sleep. It's going to we unfortunately, we look and go, Nat, what's the magic pill? What's the thing I can take to fix it? And your prescription is probably not anything to do with a drug. It's actually to do with all of these little pieces that we've just talked about.
Yeah, it's a whole lifestyle. And again, as you mentioned, I don't know if it's just laziness or just too much of the advertising and marketing that this magic pill will just help you and, get your sex drive again. And you made such a good point around the stress side of things and how when people go on holidays, they feel at ease, they have more fun, so forth. I've also noticed when they do go on holidays, they either get sick as well due to being so stressed, and then the cortisol drops and then the body's like, well, what is going on? And it actually for a moment feels safe to let go. Then your immune system, goes with it. And speaking of letting go, too often I get women who have that fear of surrendering and seeing what will happen. Well, what would I experience in the bedroom if I just, go with what my partner says, or exploring independently as well. I think that's also another topic to go over, where women tend to have this taboo around self-pleasure and masturbation. And again, it's being able to teach them that there is a way going about it by exploring what they enjoy doing and having a better sex drive.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's because we're not talking about it. Or if we are, it's because there's probably a couple of bottles of champagne involved. It's the only time we feel that we can talk about it, which is such a sign that you should be talking about it anyway, right? And I don't think that that's the recipe either. So, I think we have to be more open to having these conversations, but at the same time, you and I can create more resources to allow that to happen and for women to feel confident and able. And yes, I agree with you. Not everybody that's listening to this episode will have a partner. And so what does that mean for them? And I think it makes no sense to me that we have this incredible body that does all of these amazing things, yet there's that one bit that we should just ignore. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I don't think it's not by accident that we can experience pleasure. I don't think that's an accident at all. I think it's actually who we are, and I think it can really be great. And I also know the other side of it is there's so much research around the chemicals and hormones that can be definitely increased by orgasm, and how that can actually even do crazy things like help to support ovulation and minimize period pain. And it helps with implantation if you're trying to have a baby. And there's so many reasons as to why that's important to explore outside of having a baby.
And creativity as well.
Right. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
So much creativity comes from having self-pleasure or having sex in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so useful for women to have this understanding of how their life changes can be improved with the help of reducing stress, prioritizing their health, getting movement, and also, as you mentioned, like tracking their cycle as well, because too often if you're not tracking, you don't have a better understanding of what's actually happening with the hormones.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And then there's small shifts that you can make to help with that. If you're tracking your cycle and all of a sudden, let's for example, you notice that you're ovulating later than you usually do, but this is becoming a consistent pattern. Well, why is that? I'm telling you, it's not by chance. It's your body responding to the environment that you have put it in. It's usually because you've got, again, back to that old friend of ours, cortisol, too much stress, and your cortisol's elevated, and it's delaying that process happening in your body because it's not ideal for conception. Again, it's always trying to get you pregnant. So, and that's amazing. That's not a bad thing. So many women will be listening going, oh, I don't want that. It's like, well, that's what it's doing. So best understand it so you can work with it, not against it. So if I knew that about myself, then I can then then understand also what happens when you ovulate late is your period's late. So if you don't know that for starters, you're going to get to day 28 and you're going to freak out because you're going to think you're pregnant because you haven't actually watched when you've ovulated. And so that's the week from hell for a lot of people that don't want to be pregnant, that are like, or even that do want to be pregnant and then their period shows up a week late. That's awful too. So knowing this, and I will use a cycle to actually be able to pinpoint what is the hormone imbalance. If you're ovulating too early, if you're ovulating too late, if you're experiencing symptoms at various times, those are such amazing clues. And I can't tell you how many people go, oh, can't I just test to find this out? No, you actually can't. You need the feedback from your body. You can test and you can combine the feedback, but the feedback's never wrong, and sometimes the tests are. So, I think that's really important to see, okay, my body is speaking to me every day. I am different every single day in my cycle. What my hormones were doing yesterday and what they're doing tomorrow can be polar opposites. And if I know that and I can work with that, but I can also utilize this information to help me understand my body better, my moods better, my libido better, my appetite better, then that changes the game for us. It means we actually, like I said, I can give myself grace. But if I'm not watching and I get to that point in my cycle, I'm like, why am I so hungry? I could eat the damn pantry and fridge. What's wrong with me? Is this how and this is the other thing. We always think, oh, is this how I am now? Is this perimenopause and I'm going to be hungry forever? Like, this is what we do without actually observing what's happening. Am I pregnant? Like, we go to the worst case scenario, and actually it's just usually something pretty simple. So if I was to say, okay, well, we've talked about so many things, but stress and cycle awareness, I think when it comes to our bodies, are the two things that have really shone through this whole 45 minutes or however long we've been speaking for, that's really shone through as being essential when it comes to libido and everything else.
Mm. It's so interesting that we're shining the light on all of this. And I literally had a funny memory come up of, us thinking, perimenopause, this is going to happen, or, having these certain symptoms, or the period being late. And too often this year, I haven't really been dating, but I have this running joke with my girlfriends. If my period does run a day or two late, I'm like, oh guys, I think I'm pregnant. And it's just like, no, you're not, because you have to have sex for that and you're not sexually active.
Can I tell you how many other women think that too? I think it's actually so interesting. It's pretty hilarious actually, but you're not alone there. You're definitely not alone at all. And then we can laugh about it now until our period's late, and then we can, start to wonder, did I sleep in a hotel where there were bed sheets and I rolled over? So ridiculous, but we still go there.
We do. Yeah.
And there's so much more education that needs to happen about this, because we are still even educating in some schools that you can fall pregnant without having sex, and that's wild because you can't. So, I think there's still a lot more conversation that we need to continue to have around this, and also to be able to have conviction and just a knowing by being able to watch what our body is telling us. It's, I think once you do that, I get to a point now where I really look at how my body gives me feedback every day and wonder how people can't know. Like, how can you not know? But I guess I've been watching it for a long time. And I think circling back to the first part of this conversation, that's so important for young women to understand, to really piece that together, to have that body wisdom from a young age. So we're not just tapping into body wisdom when we're either trying to prevent pregnancy or have a baby, but we just understand it when it's not even, those things aren't even on our radar. How good would that be?
Yeah, it will be amazing. And again, that's where we come into the picture by changing that narrative and making more women realize being able to learn that feedback from their body and not making assumptions that they are pregnant or not.
We laugh, but yes.
Yeah, and I do believe soon enough it will start changing and improving, because again, these days there's more education and research out there from when we started in the industry. I know we spoke about like life changes and hormones. I also wanted to touch point a little bit on food.
Yes.
You mentioned regarding appetite, that affects it as well. And I know you're very big in educating women on certain types of food that do help your libido as well.
Right. Well, I think that again does come back to cycle awareness as well, because each phase is dependent on the next. Hormones are dependent. They're the building blocks, but one builds the next, which builds the next. So, when I look at certain foods and how they support libido, it's because they're supporting our sex hormones in various ways. So yeah, definitely don't go out and eat a truckload of Brazil nuts, because you would probably not feel very well. However, they are really they're, really high in selenium and zinc, and they're very useful to help with, supporting, both progesterone and estrogen. But, narrowing it down, seed cycling is something we talk a lot about as well, which is super useful to help balance hormones, super safe unless you're allergic to a certain seed. Can be really beneficial to help to support healthy estrogen, which then goes on to support healthy progesterone. So looking at how you can utilize certain nutrients to support the phases, but also fundamentally, your hormones are made of fat and protein. If you're not eating enough fat and protein, you're not even going to make the hormones in the first place. And that's all hormones, not just sex hormones. So to feel balanced, and I think a lot of women are still afraid of eating good quality fats. I think they still think that there's still somehow that thing that your mum told you about, high fat is still in there somewhere. And we kind of go, oh, hang on. Now, I do know also as we get older, the research definitely talks to this, and women need to make sure they're increasing their fat and protein. It doesn't mean no carbohydrate, by the way, but it is really important that we are actually looking at a plate and how do we balance our plate. And so fat and protein, really important. And then, you can get into specifics. A lot of people will be like, Nat, you've forgotten to mention oysters. We know that they're an aphrodisiac. Well, they're high in zinc as well. And to a degree, lots of other nutrients, but there are specific foods like that as well that we know help to support healthy libido as well. So, I think it's we're not going to go out and just eat 17 kilos of oysters and hope for the best, are we? That balanced diet is really important, but you can look at where the deficiencies might be, look at your plate, look at your macro and micronutrients and go, okay, am I ticking boxes here? Like really starting to think about what am I putting in my body, and am I stressing out my digestive system, or am I supporting my digestive system as well? All of these things play in. And at the end of the day, if you're eating the wrong foods all the time and you're feeling bloated and you can't move your bowels, it's not going to feel like I am feeling like I'm looking fabulous. Definitely not. So there's that plays into. There's just so many parts to it. So yeah, I definitely think fat and protein at every meal. Easily digested foods. A lot of people don't go very well with cold and raw foods. They're hard to digest. They'll cause bloating. They'll cause reflux. They'll upset the bowels. So warm cooked foods where possible, or at least room temperature, I think really is important. One of the latest things I've gotten patients to do is increase their fiber, but actually include the fiber at the beginning of a meal to set the stage for digestion to happen in a way that it doesn't spike blood sugar, because when you're spiking blood sugar, what will happen is it's got to come down and then you'll crash and you'll feel tired too. So how do we keep your blood sugar balanced? And we definitely know that fiber plays a huge role in that and has actually a flow-on effect to hormones as well, be it testosterone and estrogen specifically. So, that's something else that I say to patients, add your fiber first. You're going to have more energy. You're going to sleep better. You're going to digest better. Like everything's going to just be better just from doing that alone. And that could look like a handful of almonds or some raspberries or berries of any kind, probably just not strawberries, popcorn. I know, got to find what you like. A carrot. Again, I've just told you not to have raw food. Now I'm telling you to eat a carrot, so I'm contradicting myself. But that I have really seen move the needle for patients, I have to be honest, the fiber first. It's been an absolute game changer just from very, very simple adjustments. And that's what I think our approach should always be. If I make simple adjustments, what actually happens is I'm just creating space for my body to do what it needs to do without anything stopping that. And you'll be very surprised at what happens when you give your body the space to recover and heal and then work in an optimal manner. So everything I do nowadays is actually towards that. How do I create space for the body to do what it innately knows how to do?
And what a beautiful way to look at it, by having those simple adjustments to add into your life instead of looking and going, oh, it's just another thing that I have to do. It's just like, no, like how can we enhance your life a little bit better? And that goes back to the lifestyle changes that we were talking earlier regarding stress. It's like doing a little bit more movement, sleeping better, stressing less by getting either assisted help or going on holiday.
Right. You know what the biggest thing for stress is actually? They are all really important things that you've spoken about. But I think the biggest thing is actually recognizing when you're actually stressed. Most people couldn't even tell you that they are. And one of the things patients will say to me, if I say, are you stressed? Their default answer is, oh, but I cope fine. That's not my question. I'm asking, are you stressed? They don't even know that they are. So actually, we have to become conscious of our stress. We have to acknowledge it. Otherwise, we can't do anything with it. And that's the only way we're ever going to actually change our this whole cascade that happens when cortisol peaks is by actually being aware, because what you're doing is when you're actually being aware and you're acknowledging it and it's coming from your subconscious into your conscious mind, you're actually able to create a moment in time where you can actually bring your stress levels down. And the more you're doing that, the more aware you become, and the more you can actually start to operate and idle with your cortisol lower. But if you're not aware of it and you're not allowing yourself to acknowledge it, you'll never change. So the number one thing you have to do is become aware of your stress levels, acknowledge that, in the moment, I'm feeling stressed right now. Like, this is what I get patients to do. It's like, oh my gosh, that's the biggest key. When you take that breath in, that's your body's signal of, Nat, you're stressed. You're just ignoring it. And so I try and get patients to be aware of at least that. Oh, I've just taken a breath. Okay, I'm stressed. Nice chat, Nat. And then we move on.
I'm really glad I'm not the only one who speaks to herself.
Oh, yeah, we have to do that. I've got a whole committee up here.
Yeah, I know.
Constantly, they're solving everything.
Oh my God. I tell you what, the more we speak about this, the more women are going to be able to have the knowledge around knowing the feedback they get from the body. And as you mentioned, being more conscious about their stresses around life, hormones, whatever it is. And I think I truly believe that this is what's going to change this generation when they're looking at sexual health and libido.
100% agree. Yeah. I mean, let's do that. Maybe we all whoever's listening needs to commit to doing that. You know that I turned 45 2 weeks ago, and I decided that I had to do one thing that either was uncomfortable or that I put off every day. That's my latest thing. So maybe it's more uncomfortable conversations. Maybe it's raising these, pushing ourselves outside our comfort zone. But yeah, I was like, right, each day I'm going to do something that I've either been avoiding or procrastinating or just totally don't want to do. You have to do one thing every day for the next 365 days. So far, it's going well.
I love that. What was something uncomfortable you did today?
What's something? No, I haven't done it yet, but after I get off here, I'm procrastinating around creating a presentation. I'm going to go and do that next. And I procrastinate over mundane tasks. I hate going to the post office. I hate going to the bank. I hate filling up the car with petrol. I'm going to have to do that. So it's stuff like that. I actually will drive the car until there's nothing left in it. And my husband will be like, oh my gosh.
Guilty. Yeah.
Why do I hate it? It's just such a waste of time. I could be doing so many more things. So I have done lots of things. On my actual birthday, I had to go, and this is like, I put this off. I had to go and get every bank statement for 5 years printed off at the bank. I was like, oh gosh. So I actually made myself on my birthday morning go in and do that. That was the starting point. Walked out with 5 years of statements printed. Things like that. It's nothing, that's not revolutionary, but by doing it, A, I tick a box. B, I feel fantastic for ticking the box, and I move outside. I still think doing things like that pushes us outside our comfort zone because it's something that we don't want to do.
I totally agree. And this is something that I always speak to my clients about, is literally doing the hardest thing first, or the thing that you're actually avoiding, just to prove yourself.
I did that this morning. I went to the gym, you see. Like I said, I haven't actually properly trained for a really long time. And I thought that I didn't need to, and turns out I think I'm wrong. It's only been a few days, but I'm like, oh wow. So I did. I got up at 5:30 and off I went with my husband, and but I think that's probably something that I would totally just rather stay in bed.
Don't we all? But we still get up and do it because we know the benefit from it.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Nat, thank you again so much for jumping on today. This conversation has been a big eye-opening for a lot of women. I can already feel the change within their mindsets, and I hope that they will be able to put a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I know we've scratched the surface, but I think the whole point is opening up minds to be a little bit more curious, and sort of, whatever hit a nerve, maybe explore. Mm-hmm. Literally.
Yes, literally. Well, girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Academy, tag myself, tag Nat. And then till next time, let's have these uncomfortable conversations and let's put a little bit more emphasis towards our libido health.